Did medieval women spend their lives confined to a castle, always quiet, never learning anything beyond spinning wool? Were their choices truly limited to marriage or the convent, with no real say in their own destiny during the era spanning roughly 500 CE to 1500 CE? Number 7. They were all passive and meek. The common idea of medieval women often suggests they were uniformly submissive, never raising their voices, accepting their fates without question. It paints a picture of quiet obedience where personal will or assertive action was absent from their lives. History reveals a much different story filled with individuals who directly challenged such expectations, commanded respect, and actively shaped their world through their own choices and actions. Consider Eleanor of Aquitaine, a figure whose very existence challenges the idea of meekness. Born in 1122, she was Duchess of Aquitaine and Countess of Poitiers in her own right, inheriting a vast and wealthy territory in what is now France. Her status as a ruling noblewoman gave her immense influence from a young age. She first married King Louis VII of France, and during this marriage she joined him on the Second Crusade. Accounts from the time highlight her large and lavish entourage and her active participation in the journey, sometimes even suggesting routes or strategies, which reportedly annoyed the king. She held her own court within the Crusader camp, where she engaged in discussions and influenced diplomatic matters, showcasing a strong presence on a global stage. After her marriage to Louis VII was annulled, she made the bold choice to marry Henry II of England. This union made her Queen of England and the mother of future kings, including the famous Richard the Lionheart and John. Eleanor was far from a mere queen consort. She was a significant political force. She maintained her own court in Poitiers, fostering a vibrant literary and artistic scene that attracted poets and troubadours, demonstrating her cultural influence and independent taste. She actively participated in the political struggles of her sons against their father, Henry II. Her support for their rebellions led to her imprisonment by Henry II for many years, a testament to her political engagement and willingness to defy authority. Upon Henry's death, she was immediately released and quickly became a regent for her son Richard, ruling England in his absence while he was on crusade. She continued to be involved in high-level politics well into her old age, arranging important alliances and marriages for her grandchildren across Europe, further solidifying her dynasty's power. Her life was a continuous exercise in power and influence, demonstrating a formidable will and strategic mind that shaped the political landscape of both France and England. Another example is Christina of Markyate, an English anchoress who lived in the early 12th century. Her story, preserved in the Life of Christina of Markyate, details her fierce and unwavering resistance to a forced marriage. Her wealthy parents attempted to marry her to a nobleman for social and economic gain, but Christina, having privately made a vow of chastity and dedicated her life to God, refused the union. She endured immense pressure from her family, including threats, physical abuse, and even attempts to force her into the marriage through magic and coercion. Despite these extreme measures, her resolve never wavered. She managed to escape her family home, hiding for several years, moving from place to place, sometimes disguised as a man, sometimes aided by sympathetic churchmen and even a hermit. Her active measures of escape, concealment, and enduring hardship for her spiritual convictions stand in stark contrast to the image of a passive woman. She eventually found refuge at St. Albans Abbey, where she lived as an anchoress, a solitary religious recluse walled into a small cell, devoting her life entirely to prayer and spiritual contemplation. Her unwavering determination in the face of overwhelming familial and societal pressure to maintain her spiritual commitment reveals a woman of immense inner strength and active defiance. Beyond queens and saints, numerous examples exist of women who took assertive action during sieges or times of conflict. While defending castles or towns was not their primary role, when necessity called, women often stepped up to the challenge. One notable instance is the defense of Caen in 1346 during the 100 Years' War. While the town ultimately fell to the English forces under King Edward III, historical accounts mention the fierce resistance put up by the townspeople, including women, who hurled stones, tiles, and other projectiles from the walls onto the attacking soldiers below. Though not necessarily leading the defense, their physical participation in protecting their homes and communities shows active involvement in warfare, far from a meek withdrawal. Another powerful example is Jeanne de Clisson, a Breton noblewoman of the 14th century, infamously known as the Lioness of Brittany. After her husband was unjustly executed by the French king on suspicion of treason, Jeanne did not passively mourn. Instead, she sold her lands, bought 3 warships, and became a pirate. She attacked French ships in the English Channel, executing their crews, particularly nobles, as a direct act of revenge for her husband's death. Her ship's flag was black with a red sword, a symbol of her ruthless determination. For over a decade, she terrorized French shipping, demonstrating a clear display of active, even violent agency and a complete departure from passive acceptance of injustice. Her actions were driven by a powerful desire for retribution, and she took direct, aggressive steps to achieve it. In urban settings, women also displayed significant agency through their participation in economic life. In medieval towns and cities, women frequently participated directly in guild activities and commerce. While guilds were often male-dominated, many women were members, often inheriting their husband's membership or sometimes joining independently if they were skilled artisans or merchants. They ran various businesses, such as bakeries, breweries, cloth production workshops, and small shops. A woman running her own business, managing apprentices and laborers, dealing with suppliers and customers, and navigating complex market regulations required considerable assertiveness, intelligence, and a strong will. These women were not merely appendages to their husbands or fathers. They were active economic participants, making independent decisions, taking financial risks, and contributing significantly to the urban economy. Their daily lives involved direct negotiations, independent judgment regarding prices and quality, and often direct supervision of others. They might have to stand their ground in the bustling marketplace, negotiate favorable prices for their goods, or demand timely payment from clients, all actions that contradict a passive nature. The religious sphere also offered profound opportunities for women to exercise power and strong personalities. Abbesses, the heads of wealthy and influential nunneries, held significant formal authority. They managed vast estates, administered justice within their ecclesiastical territories, commissioned impressive art and architecture, and often advised powerful secular rulers. Hildegard of Bingen, a German Benedictine abbess from the 12th century, stands as an extraordinary example. She was a renowned visionary, a prolific composer of sacred music, a philosopher, a mystic, and a medical writer whose works were widely circulated. She corresponded with popes, emperors, and kings, offering them spiritual advice and sometimes sharp political counsel, openly criticizing their behavior. She even embarked on several preaching tours, speaking publicly to both clergy and lay audiences, an exceedingly rare and bold activity for a woman of her time. Her prolific writings and her public engagements demonstrate a powerful intellect and an assertive spiritual and intellectual voice. She established her own independent monastery, defying initial resistance from her male superiors and showcasing her administrative strength. Her life was characterized by relentless pursuit of knowledge, outspoken spiritual commentary, and the exercise of considerable administrative and intellectual authority. Even within legal settings, where women were often at a disadvantage compared to men, examples of their agency and assertive action can be found. Women frequently appeared in court, either as plaintiffs, those bringing a lawsuit, defendants, those being sued, or witnesses. They brought lawsuits to protect their property rights, defended themselves against accusations of various crimes, and gave testimony in disputes, even those involving significant sums of money or land. While they might sometimes be represented by male relatives or lawyers, their active participation in the legal process, their willingness to seek justice or defend their rights, indicates a far from passive attitude. For instance, widows often had specific legal rights to their dower, a portion of their deceased husband's property, and would actively pursue these rights through formal legal channels if necessary. They could challenge wrongful claims, assert ownership of property, and negotiate settlements, all of which required a proactive stance and a willingness to engage with the formal structures of society to protect their interests. The historical record also contains stories of women who defied social norms or expectations in more personal yet profoundly assertive ways. Consider Marjorie Kempe, a laywoman from Norfolk in the 15th century, whose autobiography, The Book of Marjorie Kempe, is considered the first autobiography in the English language. Marjorie was a married woman and mother of 14 children, yet she experienced profound religious visions and powerful spiritual compulsions. She chose to embark on extensive pilgrimages across Europe and to the Holy Land, often leaving her family for long periods, a highly unusual and controversial choice for a woman of her time. She was well known for her intense weeping and loud cries during religious services, which often irritated and scandalized others, leading to public criticism and accusations. She faced accusations of heresy and was subjected to interrogations by bishops and archbishops, requiring her to defend her spiritual experiences and beliefs before powerful religious authorities. Despite widespread criticism, social ostracism, and significant hardship, she steadfastly defended her spiritual experiences and her right to pursue her chosen path. Her life was a constant negotiation with societal expectations, and her decisions were often controversial and challenged the conventions of her time. Her determination to live according to her inner convictions, despite widespread disapproval and direct opposition, reveals a woman of immense fortitude and an anything but passive disposition. These numerous examples, from powerful queens and influential abbesses to defiant commoners and assertive businesswomen, paint a detailed picture of medieval women who were anything but universally passive or meek. They navigated complex social structures, pursued their goals with determination, defended their rights vigorously, and exerted influence in myriad ways, often against considerable odds. Their actions were carefully recorded in chronicles, legal documents, personal accounts, and letters, offering a rich tapestry of lives lived with clear purpose and often with great strength and active agency. Number 6. They had no legal rights. The idea that medieval women had no legal rights paints a grim picture of complete subjugation, suggesting they existed solely under the absolute authority of fathers, husbands, or brothers, unable to own property, enter contracts, or participate in the legal system in any meaningful way. This sweeping generalization, however, deeply misunderstands the complex and varied legal landscapes of medieval Europe. Legal rights and capacities for women differed significantly depending on their social status, their specific geographical location, and their marital status. While certain limitations and inequalities certainly existed within a largely patriarchal society, it is inaccurate to claim a complete absence of rights for all women. One of the most important aspects of medieval women's legal standing concerned their rights to property. While primogeniture, the inheritance of land by the eldest son, was common, especially for feudal tenures in noble families, women still possessed and exercised specific rights to property. A widow, for instance, typically had a legal right to dower. This dower was a life interest in a specific portion of her deceased husband's property, often 1/3, which was legally designated to support her after his death. This was not merely a discretionary gift from the husband's family, but a fundamental legal entitlement recognized in many parts of Europe. A widow could live on this land, manage its resources, and collect its revenues for the rest of her life, though she usually could not sell or alienate the land itself. Upon her death, it would revert to her husband's heirs. For women who outlived their husbands, this dower provided a crucial degree of economic independence and a recognized legal standing. They frequently appeared in court to defend their dower rights against challenges from the husband's family or other claimants, as countless surviving legal records from manorial and royal courts clearly demonstrate. Beyond dower, women could also inherit property outright, particularly in the absence of male heirs. If a man died without sons, his daughters would become co-heiresses, inheriting equal shares of his land and possessions. These heiresses were often highly sought after in marriage, not just for their personal qualities, but for the substantial lands and wealth they brought with them. A wealthy heiress could wield considerable influence due to her economic control, and her inheritance meant she controlled substantial resources, even if a husband might manage those resources on her behalf during the course of the marriage. However, the inherited property often remained legally hers, and in many legal systems, she could dispose of it through her will or make arrangements for its future distribution, sometimes even overriding her husband's wishes if the property was clearly her own inheritance. Married women, while legally considered to be undercoverture in many legal systems, meaning her legal identity was, in some aspects, merged with her husband's during marriage, still retained some distinct and important rights. While a husband typically managed his wife's property, including her dowry, certain types of property, such as her personal belongings, clothing, jewelry, or specific inheritances explicitly designated for her separate use, might remain under her direct control or management. In some urban legal systems, particularly in places like England and parts of France, married women engaged in trade were often granted the status of feme sole merchant. This significant legal provision allowed them to operate independently in business, meaning they could enter into contracts, incur debts, sue others, and be sued themselves, all without their husband's involvement or liability. This legal status was crucial for the functioning of medieval urban economies, where many women ran shops, workshops, or brewing businesses independently. It allowed them to act as independent economic agents, a clear departure from the idea of having no legal rights and demonstrating a specific legal capacity beyond their marital status. Single women, including widows and spinsters, unmarried women who had never married, generally enjoyed the most extensive legal rights, equivalent in many key respects to those of men. They could independently own and inherit property, enter into all kinds of contracts, make wills, sue and be sued in court, and appear as credible witnesses. They can engage in any lawful trade or profession, manage their own financial affairs, and live independently without a male guardian. This was particularly true for widows who, having passed through the state of coverture, regained their full independent legal identity and often managed significant estates or businesses inherited from their deceased husbands or from their own families. A widow of a wealthy merchant, for example, might continue to run his entire business empire, demonstrating remarkable economic and legal autonomy and the ability to control vast sums of money and property. Even in criminal law, women participated in the legal process, although often with different rules or protections. Women could accuse others of crimes, including rape or assault, and their testimony was generally taken seriously by the courts. They could also be accused of crimes themselves and would stand trial, presenting a defense just like men. While the specific legal procedures and protections varied by region and time, the idea that they were completely outside the legal system, unable to interact with it, is demonstrably incorrect. For example, the legal codes of many medieval towns specifically addressed matters pertaining to women, such as the regulation of dowry, rules of inheritance for daughters, and legal provisions for female business practices. An ecclesiastical law, which governed church matters and touched many aspects of daily life, also provided specific rights and protections for women. Women could appeal to church courts regarding issues related to marriage, divorce, and accusations of sexual misconduct or broken promises of marriage. These courts sometimes offered avenues for redress that were less accessible or different in secular courts, particularly for issues concerning personal morality or complex family disputes. Nuns and abbesses in particular operated under distinct legal frameworks within the church, often enjoying significant autonomy and property rights for their religious institutions. Abbesses, as the heads of large monastic houses, effectively functioned as feudal lords or ladies, managing extensive lands, collecting rents, and exercising jurisdiction over their tenants, all within a recognized and protected legal framework. Consider the active role of women in the creation of wills. Women frequently made detailed wills, legally disposing of their property, making specific bequests to family members, friends, servants, or charitable causes, and appointing executors to carry out their wishes. The existence of countless surviving medieval wills made by women directly demonstrates their legal capacity to own property and to direct its distribution after their death. These wills were not mere expressions of wishes, but legally binding documents, reflecting their active engagement with the legal system to ensure their desires were carried out. Furthermore, in specific local customs, which were often unwritten but widely practiced and legally recognized, women held more rights than in broader feudal law. In some regions, women could inherit land equally with men, or even solely if they were the eldest child, irrespective of gender. These local variations highlight the danger of making blanket statements about medieval women's legal standing across an entire continent in 1,000 years. The diversity of legal norms means that while some women indeed faced significant legal limitations, many others enjoyed rights and capacities that allowed them to manage property, conduct business, and actively participate in the legal process to protect their interests. The legal reality for medieval women was not a monolithic experience of having no rights, but a complex interplay of customary law, statutory law, and ecclesiastical law, varying significantly by region, social class, and individual circumstance. While patriarchal structures certainly influenced the legal system and often placed women in a subordinate position, women consistently found ways to operate within it, assert their claims, and protect their interests, demonstrating a far more nuanced and substantial legal standing than the myth suggests. Number 5. Their lives were short and brutal, ending young. The common portrayal of medieval life often suggests that everyone, without exception, died young, implying a brutal existence consistently cut short, particularly for women who faced the perils of childbirth. This idea, however, significantly misinterprets historical demographic data and overlooks the substantial portion of the population, including many women, who lived into middle and old age. While infant and child mortality rates were indeed tragically high, which heavily skews average life expectancy figures downwards, a person who survived childhood had a much better chance of living a longer and more complete life. It is undoubtedly true that medieval life presented numerous and severe challenges to health and survival. Widespread disease, recurrent famine, and occasional violence were ever-present threats. And medical knowledge was limited compared to modern understanding, and public sanitation was often poor by today's standards. Childbirth was a particularly dangerous event for women, and maternal mortality was a significant cause of death for women of reproductive age. Estimates for maternal mortality rates vary widely by region and historical period, but they were certainly much higher than in developed countries today. However, even with these inherent dangers, a woman was not guaranteed to die in childbirth, and many women survived multiple pregnancies, bringing numerous children into the world. When demographic historians calculate life expectancy at birth for medieval populations, the figures often appear strikingly low, sometimes hovering around 25 to 35 years. This statistic, however, is overwhelmingly influenced by the extremely high rates of infant and child mortality. A very large percentage of children, often as high as 30 to 50%, did not survive beyond their first few years of life, dying from common childhood diseases, malnutrition, or poor hygiene. If half of all children died before reaching the age of 5, this dramatically pulls down the average life expectancy for the entire population, including those who live to adulthood. It presents an average that doesn't reflect the experience of those who survived childhood. A more accurate and insightful way to understand adult longevity in the Middle Ages is to look at life expectancy at age 20 or life expectancy at age 30. For individuals who successfully navigated the perilous early years of childhood and adolescence, the prospects of living into middle age or even old age were considerably better. Studies of medieval populations based on careful analysis of skeletal remains from cemeteries, surviving parish registers, and various administrative documents like court rolls or tax records suggest that if a person reached adulthood, they could often expect to live another 30 or 40 years. This means that a significant portion of the adult population lived into their 50s, 60s, and beyond, engaging in productive lives for many decades. Many medieval women certainly lived long lives, with historical records providing numerous examples. Queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine lived to be 82 years old, an exceptional but demonstrably possible age even then. Margaret of Anjou, Queen of England during the Wars of the Roses, lived to 53. Isabella of France, another influential Queen of England, lived to 60. While these are aristocratic examples often associated with better nutrition and less strenuous physical labor, their longevity clearly shows that advanced age was achievable even for those who faced the significant stresses of royal life and multiple childbirths. Beyond the aristocracy, we find compelling evidence of older women in various walks of life. Medieval wills often indicate the presence of elderly mothers, grandmothers, and aunts who were still alive and receiving specific bequests, managing property, or serving as respected matriarchs within their families. The parish records, where they survive, sometimes list ages at death that indicate individuals living into their 60s, 70s, or even 80s, particularly in periods outside of major crises like plagues. Tomb effigies and monuments from the period sometimes depict women with clear signs of age, such as wrinkles or an older appearance, suggesting they lived long enough for their physical appearance to change significantly beyond their youth. In rural communities, older women played absolutely vital roles. They were often the repositories of invaluable knowledge about herbal remedies, traditional crafts like spinning and weaving, and agricultural practices passed down through generations. They frequently helped raise grandchildren, manage the household, and took on less physically demanding but still crucial tasks while younger generations worked in the fields. Their experience, wisdom, and skills were highly valued assets within their families and communities. In urban settings, older women might continue to run businesses, manage properties, or serve as respected members of their guilds or local communities, sometimes even training younger women. Yes, they were not simply seen as frail and useless once their childbearing years were over. Their contributions shifted in nature but remained important. Even in periods of acute crisis, like the devastating Black Death of the mid-14th century, while mortality was catastrophically high across all age groups, it did not mean that everyone died young. Rather, it demonstrated how extraordinary pandemic events could drastically reduce overall population size and temporarily lower average life expectancy for the entire population. However, after such events, populations often rebounded, and the general patterns of longevity for those who survived infancy and the plague reasserted themselves. The very fact that medieval societies rebuilt and continued to function after such profound demographic shocks indicates that a significant proportion of the adult population survived to perpetuate communities and their institutions. The concept of old age itself in the Middle Ages is also worth closer consideration. While modern society often pushes the definition of old age into the later decades of life, e.g. 65 plus, a person in their 40s or 50s might have been considered old in some medieval contexts. This was not because they were necessarily near death, but because they had reached a stage of life where they might no longer be engaged in heavy physical labor, or, for women, had passed their childbearing years. This cultural definition of age should not be confused with actual lifespan or physiological aging. Many individuals considered old were still active, contributing members of their families and communities for many more years, engaging in lighter work, childcare, or advisory roles. The popular notion of medieval lives being universally short and brutal often stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of historical demographic data, particularly the disproportionate impact of infant mortality on average life expectancy figures. While life was certainly challenging and threats to health were numerous, survival to adulthood significantly increased a person's chances of living a substantial number of years. Medieval society included many older women who played active, respected, and important roles, demonstrating that a life cut short in early adulthood was far from the universal experience for medieval women. Number 4. They were solely focused on marriage and childbirth. This myth suggests that the lives of medieval women revolved exclusively around the pursuit of a suitable husband and the subsequent bearing and raising of children, portraying these as their only societal roles and personal aspirations. This narrow view ignores the profoundly diverse paths women took, the varied and often essential contributions they made to society, and the range of personal choices available to them, even within the social and cultural constraints of the era. While marriage and procreation were undoubtedly important societal expectations for many women, they were far from the sole focus for all women. One significant and well-documented alternative to marriage and childbirth was the religious life. Convents and nunneries were vibrant and widespread institutions throughout the Middle Ages, offering women a recognized and respected path to spiritual devotion, intellectual pursuits, and a considerable degree of independence. For women who chose to become nuns, their lives were dedicated to prayer, study, manual labor within the monastic community, and often extensive service to their surrounding communities. They took vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, explicitly renouncing marriage and worldly procreation. This choice represented a conscious departure from the traditional domestic and familial roles. Within these religious houses, women found remarkable opportunities for education, intellectual development, and even significant leadership roles. Nuns were often literate, reading sacred texts, engaging in theological discussions, and sometimes even writing their own works of literature, history, or spirituality. As mentioned earlier, abbesses, the elected heads of nunneries, held considerable administrative, economic, and spiritual power, managing large estates, overseeing numerous staff, and interacting with powerful secular and ecclesiastical figures. These women were certainly not focused on marriage or childbirth. Their lives were centered on their spiritual devotion to God and the effective management and growth of their monastic communities. For some, joining a convent was a deeply spiritual calling. For others, it offered a valuable escape from an unwanted or forced marriage, or a chance to pursue an education and intellectual life that might not be available in a secular setting. It was a respected and recognized life choice that offered profound purpose and a significant degree of agency outside of traditional family roles. Beyond the religious sphere, some women, whether by deliberate choice or unavoidable circumstance, remained unmarried throughout their lives. While unmarried status could present certain social and economic challenges, particularly for women without independent means or family support, it was not always a path to destitution or complete social isolation. Spinsters, as unmarried women, were sometimes known. The term originally referred to women who spun thread for a living, indicating their economic activity could and did lead independent lives. They might inherit property from their families, successfully run businesses, or work in various trades to support themselves. They could be economically self-sufficient, managing their own households and finances without male oversight. A single woman enjoyed the most extensive legal rights compared to her married counterparts, as she could enter into contracts, own land, and sue in court in her own name, often having more legal autonomy than a married woman who was legally under coverture. For instance, in the burgeoning urban centers, women who did not marry or who were widowed often took over existing businesses or established their own from scratch. They might be skilled brewers, bakers, shopkeepers, innkeepers, or textile workers. Their primary focus was on their livelihood, their craft, and their economic well-being, rather than on seeking a husband or bearing children. They were active and indispensable participants in the urban economy, directly contributing to the wealth and vibrancy of their towns. Their daily lives involved practical management, shrewd financial dealings, and direct interactions with customers and suppliers, all activities independent of their marital status. Even for women who did marry, their lives were typically not solely defined by the marital bed and the nursery. Many married women, particularly those from noble or wealthy burgess families, were actively involved in managing their households, which for such families could be complex operations involving many servants, extensive accounts, and the oversight of agricultural or commercial enterprises. A medieval household was frequently a productive economic unit, not just a place of residence, and the lady of the house was its chief manager and administrator. She would supervise food production, textile creation, brewing, and oversee the health, welfare, and discipline of all who lived within her demesnes, from family members to servants and tenants. These responsibilities required significant administrative skill, economic acumen, and vast practical knowledge, extending far beyond the narrow scope of merely being a wife and mother. Furthermore, noblewomen and queens frequently played crucial roles in the intricate worlds of politics and diplomacy. They were instrumental in arranging strategic marriages for their children, negotiating important treaties, serving as regents during their husbands' or sons' absences due to crusades, wars, or extended journeys, or during their minorities. They also regularly advised rulers on matters of state. These activities were clearly not directly related to childbirth, but were vital functions of their social position, often requiring considerable intelligence, strategic thinking, and sophisticated social skill. For example, during the prolonged absence of her husband King Edward I on crusade in the late 13th century, Eleanor of Castile, Queen of England, was left as regent in England, overseeing the entire administration of the kingdom. Her focus during this period was entirely on governance, justice, and maintaining political stability, not solely on domestic matters. Women also made profound and lasting contributions to culture, art, and literature. Many noblewomen were active patrons of poets, musicians, and artists, commissioning works that shaped medieval cultural development. Their choices and financial support influenced artistic trends and supported creative endeavors. Some women, like Marie de France in the 12th century, were accomplished authors themselves, writing popular poetry and fables. These intellectual and artistic pursuits extended far beyond the confines of marriage and family life. For women who found their passions in these areas, their focus was on intellectual creation, artistic patronage, and the dissemination of knowledge. In addition, many women found purpose and community in lay religious movements, charitable activities, or confraternities, religious brotherhoods, and sisterhoods. These groups provided crucial social support, opportunities for spiritual growth, and avenues for communal service. Women involved in these groups might dedicate their time and resources to caring for the sick, aiding the poor, or performing other acts of charity, demonstrating a focus on societal welfare and spiritual merit beyond personal family life. These activities created strong bonds and a sense of shared purpose. The myth that medieval women were solely focused on marriage and childbirth vastly simplifies a complex and dynamic historical reality. While these roles were undoubtedly central for many women, historical evidence clearly shows a diverse range of paths taken by women from all social strata. From powerful abbesses and independent businesswomen to scholars, artists, and political figures, medieval women found numerous and varied ways to lead meaningful and productive lives, pursue their interests, and contribute significantly to society in capacities far beyond the traditional domestic sphere. Number 3, they were confined to the home. The pervasive image of medieval women often suggests they were largely confined to the domestic sphere, rarely venturing outside the walls of their homes or castles, engaged solely in household chores, needlework, or raising children. This perception, often rooted in idealized portrayals from later periods or Victorian sensibilities about women's proper place, is a vast oversimplification of the complex realities of medieval life. While women across different social classes and regions were active and visible participants in the public, economic, and social life of their communities, frequently traveling and working outside the home in various capacities. For the vast majority of medieval women who lived in rural areas, their lives were inextricably linked to arduous agricultural labor. Peasant women worked tirelessly alongside men in the fields, participating in nearly every stage of the farming year. They prepared the soil, sowed seeds, weeded crops, participated in the demanding harvest, and helped with threshing grain. They also tended gardens, meticulously cared for various livestock such as chickens, pigs, and dairy cows, and produced essential dairy products like cheese and butter and eggs. This work was physically demanding and often performed outdoors, sometimes for long hours under various weather conditions. Their direct contributions were absolutely essential to the family's survival and the broader manorial economy. Their presence was not confined to a domestic cottage, but extended across open fields, pastures, and bustling farmyards, making them integral to the rural landscape. Even within the domestic sphere, the home itself was often a dynamic place of production and commerce. For many women, particularly in towns and cities, their home was simultaneously their workshop or place of business. In urban settings, women commonly ran bakeries, breweries, taverns, small shops, and textile workshops directly from their residences. They produced goods for sale, managed apprentices and laborers, and directly dealt with customers. A baker's wife, for example, would be constantly moving between her home and the communal oven to bake her bread, or carrying her fresh wares to market to sell. A weaver's wife might have her loom set up in her home, but she would also need to acquire raw materials from suppliers and sell her finished cloth to merchants or individual customers, requiring regular movement within the town and beyond her front door. These activities clearly took them well beyond the literal confines of a private dwelling into the public economic sphere. These women were also consistently crucial participants in local markets and fairs. They bought and sold a wide variety of goods, whether it was surplus produce from the farm, textiles they had spun or woven, or prepared foods like bread, ale, and pastries. Marketplaces were bustling public spaces, vibrant hubs of social and economic interaction, where women interacted with a wide range of people, negotiated prices, and conducted significant business transactions. This active participation in commerce meant they were regularly out in the public square, contributing directly to the urban economy and engaging in essential social exchange. They were not merely passive consumers, they were often active producers and vendors, central to the flow of goods and services. Or travel was also a far more common part of medieval women's lives than the myth suggests, and for a variety of compelling reasons. Pilgrimage devout women, ranging from powerful queens to humble commoners, undertook long, arduous, and often dangerous journeys to sacred pilgrimage sites like Canterbury, Rome, Santiago de Compostela, or even Jerusalem. Marjorie Kempe, as previously mentioned, journeyed extensively across Europe and to the Holy Land, enduring significant hardships. These pilgrimages were often physically demanding, requiring weeks or months on the road, far from home and familiar surroundings. Trade, while less common than for men, some merchant women traveled to regional fairs in distant towns to buy and sell goods, particularly in industries like textiles or high-value commodities. These journeys could cover significant distances and involve complex logistics. Visits, noblewomen frequently traveled between their various estates, visiting relatives, attending court, or accompanying their husbands on campaigns or administrative tours. The queen's household, for instance, was constantly on the move, and the ladies-in-waiting and other female servants traveled with it, sometimes for hundreds of miles. Marriage often involved a significant journey for the bride, leaving her natal home to join her husband's family, sometimes in a different region or even a different country, especially in high-status marriages. Legal matters. Women appeared in royal, manorial, or town courts, which often required traveling to a central legal location to press a claim, defend themselves, or provide testimony. Military campaigns. While not directly fighting as soldiers, women sometimes followed armies, providing crucial support services like cooking, washing, tending to the wounded, or even defending castles during sieges, as exemplified by figures like Jeanne de Clisson. Even noblewomen, despite their privileged status and the security of castle walls, were not necessarily confined. While they might spend much time within the extensive castle compounds, these were often large, bustling, self-sufficient entities, more like small villages than private homes. Noblewomen oversaw vast households, which involved managing a significant staff of servants, provisioning for hundreds of people, and administering extensive estates. This required constant movement within the castle and its surrounding lands, and often frequent travel to other properties or to the royal court. Queens and powerful ladies regularly traveled with the royal court, moving from one castle or manor to another throughout the year. They hosted important guests, received petitions, and participated in courtly life, all of which were public-facing and mobile activities. Consider also the role of women in convents. Nuns, while living a cloistered life dedicated to spiritual devotion, were part of institutions that owned vast tracts of land, engaged in extensive economic activity, and maintained significant social connections. Abbesses often traveled to conduct business, attend church councils or synods, or interact directly with secular rulers and other powerful figures. The nuns themselves might engage in craft production for sale outside the convent, and the convent walls were not an impermeable barrier to interaction with the outside world, often having visitor parlors and providing charitable services to the local community. Midwives, healers, and wet nurses were also essential professions that required women to move freely and frequently within their communities, visiting homes and providing crucial services related to health and childcare. These women were not confined, but were active practitioners whose work took them into many different households and across various social settings. Prostitutes, too, were often highly mobile, operating in specific urban areas and interacting with a diverse clientele. The idea of universal confinement also ignores the existence of women who lived solitary or semi-solitary religious lives, such as anchoresses. While their dwelling was technically a small cell attached to a church, they chose this confinement as a specific form of spiritual devotion and detachment from the world. Even then, they often communicated with the outside world through a window, offering spiritual advice, prophecies, and inspiration to those who sought their counsel. Their choice was a specific spiritual path, not a general societal norm of confinement imposed on all women. In essence, the notion of medieval women being universally confined to the home is a romanticized, simplistic, and inaccurate generalization. The vast majority of women, across all social strata and geographical locations, engaged in work, travel, and social interactions that took them far beyond the walls of their dwelling. From the demanding labor in the fields to the bustling activity of marketplaces, from arduous pilgrimage routes to complex castle courts, medieval women were visible, active, and absolutely essential participants in the public, economic, and social life of their times. Number 2. They had no power or influence. This myth suggests that medieval women were entirely powerless, lacking any effective means to exert influence over their own lives or the wider world, existing merely as passive subordinates to men in every aspect of society. This idea fundamentally disregards the numerous and varied ways in which women, from queens to commoners, wielded significant power and influence, whether through formal authority, economic control, extensive social networks, or profound personal charisma and intellect. Power in the Middle Ages was not solely about wielding a sword or sitting on a throne. It manifested in diverse forms, many of which were directly accessible to women and allowed them to shape their destinies and their communities. Their queens were arguably the most visible and highest-ranking examples of female power. They were far from mere ceremonial figureheads. Queens often served as powerful regents during their husbands' prolonged absences, such as on crusade, at war, or due to illness, or during their sons' minorities when the heir was too young to rule. This meant they effectively governed entire kingdoms, managing vast royal finances, issuing laws, overseeing the administration of justice, and even commanding armies in times of war. Eleanor of Aquitaine, as previously mentioned, ruled England as regent for her son Richard the Lionheart. Blanche of Castile, the mother of King Louis IX of France, twice served as regent, first during her son's long minority and later during his absence on crusade. She was renowned as a shrewd politician and a formidable military strategist, successfully suppressing multiple rebellions from powerful nobles and ensuring the stability and prosperity of the French kingdom during her regencies. Her leadership in these periods demonstrates immense political and administrative power. Queens also played absolutely vital roles in international diplomacy, arranging strategic marriages for their children and grandchildren, forging crucial alliances between kingdoms, and acting as indispensable intermediaries between warring rulers. Their high social status and extensive network of connections provided them with a direct and influential avenue for political action and leverage. Beyond queens, noblewomen held substantial and often overlooked power within their own specific domains. As mistresses of castles and manors, they managed vast estates, which were complex economic and administrative units. They supervised numerous tenants, oversaw agricultural production, collected rents and taxes, and often administered local justice in their husband's or son's absence. Many noblewomen effectively ran their households, which could include hundreds of people, managing intricate finances, provisioning for large numbers, and maintaining discipline among servants and retainers. The ability to command respect, manage significant resources, and administer justice within their defined sphere of influence was a tangible and recognized form of power that directly impacted the lives of many people. Within the church, abbesses were particularly powerful figures. As the elected or appointed heads of wealthy and often extensive monastic communities, they were essentially functioning as feudal lords or ladies in their own right. They managed vast tracts of land, collected tithes, and exercised legal jurisdiction over their tenants and sometimes entire villages and towns. Abbesses could be formidable negotiators, dealing directly with kings, powerful bishops, and influential nobles on matters of property rights, privileges, and legal disputes. Hildegard of Bingen, a prominent abbess of the 12th century, not only effectively managed her large abbey but also corresponded extensively with emperors and popes, offering them both spiritual counsel and direct political criticism. She even founded her own independent monastery, which required significant authority, strategic acumen, and the ability to rally resources and support. These women held recognized spiritual, economic, and administrative power within a male-dominated institutional structure. In burgeoning urban settings, women wielded considerable economic power. As femme sole merchants, widows, or single women, they owned and operated a wide variety of businesses, ranging from brewing and baking to textile production and retail shops. They controlled capital, managed employees, entered into complex contracts, and directly influenced local markets through their entrepreneurial activities. Their economic activities directly contributed to the wealth and vitality of their towns and provided them with independent means and significant influence within their guilds or trades. Guilds often had female members, particularly in crafts related to textiles, food production, or retail, and these women had a recognized say in guild regulations, standards, and practices, further extending their influence. The accumulation of wealth and the direct control of trade provided significant social and economic leverage. Even women in more common social strata held significant influence within their immediate families and broader communities. As matriarchs, older women often held considerable sway over household decisions, choices about children's marriages, and the allocation of family resources. Their accumulated wisdom, life experience, and practical skills were highly valued and sought after. In communal village life, women participated in crucial informal networks, disseminating information, shaping public opinions through gossip and shared knowledge, and influencing local customs and social norms. Their recognized roles as skilled healers or experienced midwives also gave them unique access and significant influence within a community, as people relied heavily on their specialized knowledge and compassionate care, often regarding them with respect and deference. Furthermore, women influenced society through their patronage of the arts and their profound cultural contributions. Noble women often acted as generous patrons of literature, music, and art, commissioning new works that shaped medieval culture and taste. Their financial choices and artistic preferences influenced trends and directly supported creative endeavors. Marie de France, one of the earliest known female French poets from the 12th century, wrote widely read and admired lays and fables, influencing medieval literary tastes and narrative styles. Christine de Clisson, a prolific writer in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, was a remarkable author who commented extensively on political and social issues, including the critical status of women. She famously earned a living entirely through her writing, a truly remarkable feat for any person of her time, let alone a woman. Her intellectual work influenced contemporary thought and boldly challenged prevailing misogynistic views in society. Her ability to articulate complex arguments and engage in public discourse through her writings demonstrates a profound and lasting form of intellectual influence. Women also profoundly influenced society through their intense religious devotion and extensive charitable works. Many women were renowned for their piety, leading to their veneration as saints, or inspiring countless others through their spiritual example and profound dedication. Their spiritual authority could be immense, attracting large numbers of followers and influencing religious practices and beliefs. The lay confraternities, which included many women, engaged in vital charitable activities, cared for the sick, supported the poor, and provided comfort to the dying, thereby influencing social welfare, community cohesion, and moral standards. These actions shaped the spiritual and social landscape of their communities. The idea that medieval women had no power or influence is a gross oversimplification that fails to capture the complexity and dynamism of medieval society. While their specific avenues for power might have differed from those of men and varied greatly by individual circumstance, social class, and geographical location, women consistently found numerous and effective ways to assert their agency, manage substantial resources, shape their communities, and leave a significant impact on political, economic, and cultural landscapes. Their influence was multifaceted, pervasive, and deeply embedded in the very fabric of medieval society, far from being absent or negligible. Number 1, they were all illiterate and uneducated. The common misconception paints medieval women as uniformly unlettered, confined to a world without books, their education limited strictly to domestic skills like spinning and weaving, with absolutely no access to intellectual pursuits or formal learning. This widespread belief, often perpetuated by later historical narratives, ignores the significant and compelling evidence of female literacy and education across various social strata throughout the Middle Ages, revealing a far more nuanced and complex picture. While universal literacy for both men and women was certainly not the norm in medieval society, many women did receive formal and informal education, demonstrating a surprising range of intellectual capabilities and engaging deeply with written culture and learning. For noble women and royal women, education was often an integral and highly valued part of their upbringing. They were expected to manage vast households, supervise extensive estates, and actively engage in complex social and political life. All these responsibilities required a certain level of administrative competence, intellectual understanding, and diplomatic skill. Daughters of aristocratic families typically received instruction in Latin, which was the fundamental language of scholarship, the church, and international diplomacy, as well as their vernacular languages like French, English, or German. They learned to read and write, enabling them to read religious texts, manage intricate household accounts, and engage in extensive correspondence with other nobles, rulers, and church figures. Queens, for example, had to be able to read and understand important charters, treaties, and official state documents. Eleanor of Aquitaine, renowned as a significant patron of literature and culture, very likely possessed a sophisticated and wide-ranging education. Blanche of Castile, the influential queen and regent of France, was known for her exceptional intellectual prowess and ensured her son, Louis IX, received a comprehensive and rigorous education under her direct supervision. Many noblewomen had personal libraries and commissioned books, including lavish illuminated manuscripts, indicating their active engagement with literature, learning, and the arts. Convents and nunneries were crucial and vibrant centers of female education throughout the Middle Ages. For women who chose to enter religious life, literacy was often a prerequisite for entry, or a fundamental skill developed extensively within the monastic community. Nuns learned to read Latin for liturgical purposes, to study the Bible and other sacred texts, and to engage with complex theological treatises. Many convents maintained active scriptoria, where nuns meticulously copied manuscripts, demonstrating not only advanced literacy, but also significant skill in textual production and illumination. Some convents were renowned for their scholarly output, intellectual rigor, and impressive libraries, attracting women from noble and wealthy families who specifically sought an education beyond what might be available in secular society. Hildegard of Bingen, an abbess, was not only literate, but a prolific writer, composer, and natural philosopher whose works range from theology and cosmology to medicine and ethics, all written in sophisticated Latin. Hrotsvitha of Gandersheim, a 10th century German canoness, wrote plays, poems, and histories inspired by classical authors, showcasing an exceptional classical education and literary talent. These women were highly educated intellectuals, directly and powerfully contradicting the myth of universal female illiteracy. Even among women of lower social standing, particularly in burgeoning urban areas, literacy was not unheard of and was often a practical necessity. Merchant families, for instance, frequently ensured their daughters received at least a basic education in reading, writing, and arithmetic. These skills were essential for managing household finances, assisting directly in the family business, or running their own shops independently. As previously discussed, many women functioned as femme sole merchants, fully capable of operating their own businesses, which often involved keeping detailed accounts, drafting simple contracts, and corresponding with suppliers and customers. Such activities inherently required functional literacy and numeracy. Evidence from surviving account books, court records, and legal documents shows women signing their names or instructing scribes, indicating at least an awareness of and interaction with written communication. These women were not merely domestic laborers, they were active participants in a literate economy. Informal education also played a significant and often underestimated role in women's intellectual development. Many women learned valuable skills and knowledge through apprenticeships in various crafts and trades. A female apprentice learning brewing, baking, or textile production would acquire not only practical manual skills, but also an understanding of measurements, recipes, basic accounting, and sometimes the ability to read simple instructions or market prices. Knowledge was often passed down orally and through direct practical experience and observation, but this did not mean an absence of intellectual engagement or complex problem solving. Women also served as crucial custodians of knowledge regarding medical practices, herbal remedies, traditional folklore, and community history, acting as invaluable educators and repositories of cultural and practical wisdom passed down through generations. The gradual spread of vernacular literature also significantly contributed to female literacy and intellectual engagement. While Latin remained the primary language of high scholarship and official church documents, vernacular texts became increasingly popular and widespread from the 12th century onwards. Romances, devotional works, histories, and instructional texts were increasingly written in accessible languages like French, English, German, or Italian. These texts were far more accessible to a wider audience, including women who might not have learned formal Latin. Some women were enthusiastic patrons of vernacular literature, commissioning works for their own enjoyment, for use within their households, or for reading aloud to others. The very existence of prominent female authors like Marie de France and Christine de Clisson, who primarily wrote in the vernacular, strongly implies a significant readership that included women. Christine de Clisson, a professional author, was a self-taught scholar who built an impressive personal library and wrote extensively on a wide range of subjects, including political philosophy and a powerful defense of women's intellectual capabilities. Her ability to articulate complex arguments and engage in public discourse through her writings demonstrates a profound form of intellectual influence and education. The definition of literacy itself is important when examining medieval education. Functional literacy, which included the ability to read a little, sign one's name, understand basic documents, or read simple instructions, might have been more widespread for both men and women than scholarly literacy, which involved deep engagement with complex Latin texts and the ability to produce original scholarly works. However, to claim that medieval women were universally uneducated implies a complete absence of intellectual activity, which is demonstrably untrue. Women engaged in complex administrative tasks, managed significant economic enterprises, studied religious texts, and contributed to literature and scholarship in various forms. Their intellectual lives were rich and varied. While access to formal education varied significantly based on social class, wealth, geographical location, and personal circumstances, medieval women were far from universally illiterate and uneducated. Historical sources, from private letters to monastic chronicles and legal records, reveal a vibrant intellectual life among aristocratic women, a strong and enduring tradition of scholarship within convents, and widespread functional literacy among urban women engaged in trade and commerce. The myth of medieval female illiteracy simplifies a rich, diverse, and often surprising landscape of female learning, intellectual contribution, and engagement with written culture throughout the expansive period of the Middle Ages.